Well, welcome back to what we're calling Guilt-Free January. And yes, today is all about guilt. Guilt when a friendship ends. Last week, we talked about that realization that we've outgrown a friendship, that it's reached its expiration date. But today, we're going to talk about that ugly feeling of guilt, how to work through the uncomfortable feelings when we realize that we've outgrown a friendship. Maybe it's a close friend, maybe it's a close acquaintance, maybe it's a group of ladies that we've hung out with for a long time, a group we've belonged to. And why guilt doesn't mean that you're being unkind, you're being unfair, you're being selfish, or those dreaded two words, you're being a mean girl. Please. This year, we're empowering ourselves to do friendship differently. So yes, last week we talked about coming to that realization and how you get there. You realize the friendship has an expiration date. Maybe it's past, maybe it's coming up. And you know that the friendship is going to end or change, but no one did anything wrong. So how do we keep from feeling guilty when a friendship ends without a fight? Because sometimes fights make us feel better, right? But rather we just realize it isn't healthy for us to be in the relationship anymore. Maybe our interests have changed. Maybe we've put up with a lot to keep the friendship going, but we're just not interested in continuing to go along to get along. And like I said last week, maybe we're just not feeling it anymore. But I think for us, women over 50 and beyond, that realization can feel a little bit unsettling. We're already going through a lot of changes, and this just seems to be one more that we don't really want to deal with. But what often comes after realizing that, hey, this is where this friendship is, there comes that heavy feeling of guilt. So today is all about the guilt, how to recognize it and how to deal with it. Guilt for pulling back, guilt for changing, guilt for not wanting what we used to want. And sometimes there's even guilt for feeling relief that, oh, that person's not in my life anymore. So today, let's talk about the emotional aftermath when a friendship expires, because it sounds easy, but I think we've all gone through it and we know that it isn't. So the end doesn't mean that you're cold, you're selfish, you're unkind, and it doesn't automatically mean that you have to walk away. You can have guilt from ending the friendship like that, washing your hands, but you can also have guilt from pulling back. And there are actually several healthy ways we can navigate this stage, and none of them make you a bad person. We always say it here, you choose what's best for your journey. Doesn't make you a bad person or, like I said, a mean girl. And most of us have been dumped in our life by a mean girl, and we know how bad that feels. And this is not that. So we've been talking about how friendships, sometimes important friendships, quietly expire. Not with a fight, not with a dramatic ending, but really with that kind of gnawing feeling. It just gets into the back of your head that things just can't go on. It doesn't feel good anymore. The friendship's just off. You're just not feeling it like you used to. And unfortunately, once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? It's those little things that now you're aware of start piling up. They start bugging you, and it can cause you to kind of turn on that person. So the self-awareness doesn't bring immediate peace. Sometimes it brings with it guilt. And especially for older women, our time and energy are much more precious, and we get to choose what's best for us. So why do we feel guilt and how do we deal with it? Because I think it's pretty much a woman thing. I believe that women in general, especially our generation, were raised with unspoken rules about friendship. We learn them on the playground. You don't abandon your friends. Loyalty means staying no matter what, working it out. Good women just make things work. Or you should be grateful. You've known her forever. Why would you lose a friend you've had forever? So when you change, when your needs change, when your capacity changes, you're kind of made to feel like a failure instead of just saying, wow, this was great while it lasted, but now it's going to have to be something different. I think it's just so much pressure on women. But when a friendship expires, it isn't betrayal. It's just growth. It's change. And it doesn't matter how old we are. We're allowed to grow. We're allowed to change. We are allowed to have whatever feelings we want to have. But I think sometimes it feels a little bit threatening, because it's breaking our normal situations and relationships that have become habit. And another layer of guilt is fear, the fear of regret, right? Will I regret this later? Will I find new friends? Will I be all alone? And as we get older, it is harder to make new friends. We talk about that all the time. We don't want to end up alone. And so we worry that we should hang on at all costs. We tell ourselves, am I being too picky? Is it all about me? And that fear can keep us stuck in friendships that quite honestly can be draining, as we talked about that last week. It's mental draining, but it's also physical draining. So what's the upside to making the tough decision that it's time to go our separate ways? Well, it's definitely a fork in the road. There's no right or wrong answer, and we each get to choose our own path. And sometimes we wander back and forth between paths. Most women go back and forth when they're deciding how to handle something that meant a lot to them. So we'll call path one just letting the friendship fade naturally. Like I said earlier, no fight, no fuss, just growing apart. Many of us choose to not have a big conversation, to not explain, to not make any big, profound announcement because we don't want to burn bridges, right? We simply start reaching out less. We stop over explaining ourselves and we allow time and space to do what it naturally does. We take away the sense of urgency in the friendship, that always being available, always making it work. And that path is often chosen by us when we're emotionally exhausted by the friendship and we don't know how to pull the plug. When we feel like there's no hope of the other person changing or of us changing, or we're just too old to bother. We want peace. We don't want conflict. We don't all handle conflict as well as we used to when we're younger. It's draining. And this matters because only you know what your capacity is for drama, trauma, argument. So letting a friendship fade gradually isn't cowardly, right? I think honestly it's deeply intentional because you're considering what you can handle, but also what they can handle. And sometimes we know our limitations and we don't want to cause unnecessary harm. And if this is your path, what I would say to you is just stop feeling like you have to justify. Expect that there will be guilt. Let it hit you. Let it pass through you and give yourself grace. We don't give ourselves enough grace. And finally, remind yourself that distance isn't cruelty. So not replying to every text right away, not answering the phone every time it calls, not always being available doesn't make you bad. The second path would be keeping the friendship, but in a different form. So Some women decide that the best path is to just not let go completely, to kind of rewrite the friendship. As I mentioned, don't be so available all the time. Put a little space, because your history matters. Longevity of the relationship matters. And yes, because making new friends at our age can sometimes feel so daunting that it's easier to keep what we have. And quite honestly, depending on your situation, you may be very limited in opportunities to meet new people and to try new things. And so often when a woman makes that decision, what they're saying is, I don't want to lose her, but I can't keep doing this friendship thing the same way. And that's one of the biggest comments that we get here on the page or the channel in our community. Women saying, I've seen it coming for a long time. I don't want to give up the friendship, but it's got to change. So here are a few changes that you can make to the friendship to help you feel empowered and set some boundaries. So stop sharing real personal things, make it less emotional. Limit your time, limit your space, limit your availability. And this can be the wisest and the most loving choice. Give it some space. But it only works if you're honest with yourself. Well, most things don't work unless you're honest with yourself. What do you have to realistically offer the friendship? You have got to stop giving too much, because you'll build resentment. And instead of bypassing guilt, you'll be self-absorbed with it, because you'll become angry. And that grief sometimes, or that guilt rather, can sometimes turn into sadness or into even grief. Guilt can be a really destructive thing, because you feel like you're not just losing a person in your life, someone who is important. You're losing part of the old you, that you're losing that shared history, the comfort of familiarity. You're losing the habit, and habits are hard to break. And that loss can trigger sadness and even depression. And none of us need any depression at our age. And, if you can't redefine the friendship, if you don't have new connections to fill the space where that person once was, maybe you're already in a season of a lot of transitions. Your life is changing. Maybe you've had to sell your house and downsize. Maybe you've moved. You've already got too much going on. You can't handle anymore. So feeling low, feeling guilty after a friendship ends, after it expires, doesn't mean that you wasted time. And you've got to make yourself believe that, because if you get obsessed with regret, that's where all that depression can come from. Instead, look at it differently. It means you're human. It means you care deeply. And it means that you are an empathetic and a caring person. So what are some tools for us to deal with letting go of this guilt and emotional fallout? Because we'll usually experience one, if not both. And I've read a lot of books. I'm sure you've read a lot of books, and we've gone through a lot of life experiences at our age. And they always tell you separate guilt from the truth. And that takes a lot of self-reflection, but we all play a role in every friendship, and we all play a role in things changing. So ask yourself, what about this relationship is maybe uncomfortable? If you've got that nagging feeling that something's changed in the friendship, that they were doing something you just can't tolerate anymore, name it, right? Admit it. Put it in your brain. It's always important to ask yourself, am I doing something wrong, or have I just moved on? Doesn't a lot of guilt come from that gnawing feeling that we're doing something wrong or doing something unkind. So you have to kind of get yourself settled in a place where you know you're doing the right thing, not just for you, but for her. Or it may be a friend doing it to you. And by naming it, by calling it out, it doesn't minimize what you're feeling. It should be complicated because friendship should matter. And so dealing with it should be a process. We just don't want to be guilty about it. But be honest about your role in the relationship. I did a video, I think a month and a half ago, about breadcrumbing. Gosh, don't just take what you're given. You're worth so much more. If you find yourself still initiating, managing your friend's emotions, acting like a therapist, you find yourself constantly explaining, over-explaining, walking on eggshells, no, it's time for change. You get to allow mixed emotions. You get to feel grief. You get to feel sadness, and you get to feel it all at the same time, because both can be true. Giving up a friendship, especially when you don't feel like you have any other choice, can hurt. But remember that friendships have a season, right? They have a value. A meaningful friendship doesn't become meaningless just because it changes or just because it ends. So what I would say is if you outgrow someone, know first and foremost that it doesn't make you disloyal. It doesn't mean you lack gratitude or empathy. And it sure as heck doesn't mean you're a mean girl. You get to continue to change no matter what your age is. You get to continue to grow. You get to put yourself first, no matter what age you are. We are not too old for much of anything. Whether you choose to let the friendship fade or continue the friendship, but with space and with boundaries, what matters most is you're no longer abandoning yourself to keep someone else comfortable, or you think you're keeping them comfortable, but are you? Now, if you can relate to this, I think we all can. I would love to hear your comments because you are not alone. I can't say it enough. We do not stop evolving and growing just because we're older. So next week, we're going to build on this, and we're going to talk about how to open ourselves up to new friendships, new interests, new opportunities. And they don't need to look the same as they did when we were 40. And we're not going to be forcing ourselves into anything we're not comfortable with. Because this year we're doing friendship differently. We're doing it with honesty, and we're doing it with compassion. Compassion for the people in our lives, but also compassion for ourselves. Well, I'm so glad you stopped by the channel. Happy January as we continue to change the world. Well, at least our friendships. So I hope you'll take a moment to comment. I hope you'll subscribe to the channel. We've had a lot of growth recently, and I'm glad so many women are stepping into the conversation, because who do you talk to about these things? Not your friends. It's kind of a double-edged sword. You don't want the friends you do have to know that you have a problem with another friend. It becomes a big drama. So anyway, come here and we'll talk about it right here on the channel. Take care. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.